to kind of explain things and see if you have questions. But so first off, yeah, does anyone have any questions in particular or something that you think is more confusing?
This isn't quite about like the study guide. I just for the notebook, I wasn't there on Friday, so I don't have the like one of the sheets, the one sheet that you don't have an online copy of.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Just when you turn it in, just make a notation that you were absent. If you can, when you turn it in on Edmodo, I think you can add a message or something.
Yeah.
Ash,
Yes.
I have the sheet if you need any pictures of it. I can just send it to you if you need anything.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, or yeah, I just don't have. I only have a. That's the only one I just have a hard copy of because I got it out of some book.
Yeah.
All right. So any other questions about? I mean, so the test will be. You guys already took the other test online already, right? So you should
Yeah.
be able to. I think there are a few questions where there's like a chart attached to the question, so you'll have to like open a Word file to see it and then answer the question using that. So hopefully that'll work okay. But yeah, let me know if there's any problems tomorrow. Or yeah, so just probably the next unit we'll have to do similar situation where I'll probably like record another PowerPoint lecture. So hopefully that worked out. Anyway, so are there any questions about anything? Or I mean, yeah, of course about the material, but if you have other questions, you can ask me too. So or would you rather I just kind of go through things? So any particular questions that you guys had or like things that you're confused about as far as the legislative branch? Or do you want me to just go through the study guide? I'll take that. No questions? Huh? You what? Is everybody good? So you got to turn the audio on. But like, oh, the 6th district. So yeah, that was in the PowerPoint, I think. So that you need to know, yeah, just because I think it's good knowledge to have is who your representatives are. So you need to know like the 2 senators from Georgia, which is currently David Perdue, which is Perdue, and Kelly Loeffler. She was the one appointed because Johnny Isakson had to resign because of health issues. So she was appointed by Governor Kemp, so she's sort of a fill-in for now until we have the next election. And so her name is Kelly Loeffler, and that's Loeffler, I believe. So, and then you have our representative for the 6th district. So Walton's part of the 6th. There's 14 congressional or House districts in Georgia. The 6th district representative right now is Lucy McBath. So you need to know that also. So Lucy McBath. So it's McBath, right? Yeah. So the first part, if I just go through the study guide, and then if you guys have questions, just stop me and or you can ask anytime. So the first part just says Article 1, you should know that the legislative branch is described in Article 1 of the Constitution. So that's where it lists like the setup and all of its powers and things like that. On the outline, most of you guys got this, but the idea of like why we have a bicameral legislature. And by the way, so if you guys, hopefully you've already seen the study guide and you're looking over that, but did anybody try that Jeopardy? I posted the Jeopardy PowerPoint. Did you guys see that? I don't know if anybody tried that. It's kind of hard to maneuver through the actual game if you don't know what you're doing, but you can just scroll through the slides and it has like remember Jeopardy's like it gives you the answer, then the next slide is like the question that goes with that answer. So if it says like, it'll say like 2 years, or I can't remember which one's first, but it'll say like, this is the number of years that you serve once you're elected to the Senate. And then it says, what is 6 years or something like that. But anyway, So look through those things. That should help you. But yeah, the bicameral legislature there's a couple reasons for it, but the original reason was because it was part of the compromise at the Constitutional Convention. So remember, like the small states, the big states and the small states couldn't agree on how to set up the legislature. So they set up a two house or two chambers in Congress, a bicameral legislature. The House is based on population, like proportional representation, and the Senate has equal representation, right? 2 per state. But it also serves as a check and balance, so it makes it a little bit harder to pass laws. You also had, remember, the House was originally supposed to be like the people's branch. The House was elected by the people of the states. Back then, usually almost every state said you had to be white and male and you had to own property to be able to vote. But at least some people got to vote for the House members. The senators were originally appointed, so that also kind of builds in some of the differences that they established. So senators were supposed to be more elite, come from more of the elite class, whereas the House was the people's branch. So they might do more crazy stuff and whatever, not crazy, but they would do stuff that the founders thought would be a little more irresponsible. And so the Senate was supposed to be a check on that. So a lot of you guys, hopefully you looked, make sure if you haven't, look at the answers I typed up for some of the questions from the outline. I tried to include a lot of detail and explanation on that. Okay, so make sure you guys look that over. But I explained that quote from George Washington, they pour the legislation from the House into the Senate saucer to cool it. And so the idea is the Senate was supposed to be more elite, responsible people, wiser, wealthier people who would, the founders were, those types of people. So they didn't want too much crazy stuff to happen. What they thought would be crazy is if they passed laws that put big taxes on the wealthy or, tried to confiscate or take land from the big landowners and give it to poor people and stuff. They didn't want that type of stuff to happen. So then hopefully you guys did the thing on powers of Congress. We missed out. Had a pretty fun game to go with that, but anyway, but most of the congressional powers are listed in Article 1, Section 8. So you guys were supposed to fill that out. But yeah, at the very end, or do you might have a question so far? So after they list all their powers, like the power to tax and the power to borrow money and the power to declare war and the power to regulate trade and the power to all that stuff, create post offices. After they list all those things, the very last one says they have the power to do whatever is necessary and proper, right? To carry out their other powers. So the expressed or enumerated powers, they can stretch those powers using the necessary and proper clause, right? So that gives Congress more flexibility, but it doesn't mean they can just do whatever they want. It has, like we talked about, they have the power, or at least I think we talked about this earlier when we did implied powers, when we did the Constitution. But they can raise an army. The implied power would be to create a military draft. That would come from the necessary and proper clause. So they're doing what's necessary and proper in order to carry out their power to raise an army, okay? But there are also some limits on congressional power, and some of these things are kind of complicated. You guys wrote some of this stuff in your outline, but I'm not sure you understood what it meant. So again, look at the answers I posted, but things like they can't pass bills of attainder, which is a bill that would punish a group of people, as if you were being tried by Congress. They can't do that. Pass ex post facto law. They couldn't say it's illegal to own an AR-15 and suddenly arrest everyone who has one because when they bought it, it was legal. So they can't pass a law that goes into effect retroactively. And then things they can't tax exports. They can't tax goods shipping out of the country. They also can't tax goods from state to state. They can't suspend writ of habeas corpus, which gives you the right to be presented to a judge and know what you're being charged with. So you can't just be held in prison forever and things like that. So just look over some of the limits. And then checks and balances. So the legislative branch, their main checks on the other branches would be things like they can impeach and remove both executive officials like the president and judges. Okay, it works against both branches. Of course, the president can veto a bill, but Congress can override the veto. It almost never happens, but technically they can. They have to get a 2/3 vote of the House, 2/3 vote of the Senate. And then remember, the House and Senate have unique powers, just a few of each. But the main thing the House has is like the power to initiate money bills, like anything that's taxing or spending. But the Senate has more unique powers. Like only the Senate has to approve presidential appointees. So that would be a check that they have over the president. And the Senate has to approve judges that are appointed by the president. So that's a check on the executive and the legislative branch. I mean, sorry, on the executive and judicial branch. Let's see. So those are some of the main ones. And then you have, or did you guys understand that thing about the House, like why all money bills have to start in the House? Or like you understand why they did that? Because the House was elected by the people. The Senate is elected by the people now after the passage of this, remember the 17th Amendment? But originally the Senate was appointed by the state legislatures. So you think it's more symbolic, but because the Senate has to always had to approve taxes anyway, but they have to initiate with the people's branch, that otherwise it would have been like taxation without representation. Does that make sense to everybody? Why they did that? So you guys can chime in at any time here. Any questions so far? Or are you guys just listening? Yes, no questions. All right, who has this weird picture up on the screen? Who's that? Remember, just don't put pictures of yourself up on the screen, because if I post this on the internet, I don't want to get in trouble for posting pictures of minors and stuff like that. So, the next thing on the study guide is like impeachment and removal process. So you just need to understand the two basic steps. First, the House impeaches you. The House would gather information and investigate, and it takes a majority vote to impeach, but that doesn't mean you're removed from office, right? President Trump was impeached. He was formally charged or accused, right? Then it goes to the Senate for a trial, and the Senate is like the jury. They listen to the evidence from the House, and they decide if that person is guilty of that charge. If you're found guilty, it takes a 2/3 vote, majority vote. And if you're found guilty, you would be kicked out of office. So no president has ever been removed from office, but 3 presidents have been impeached, right? Trump, Clinton, and Andrew Johnson. Now, Andrew Johnson was almost removed. The Senate was 1 vote short of a 2/3 majority to remove him. But there have been some judges who've been impeached and removed, and some other officials, I think like 17 total, but never the president so far. So I mentioned unique powers of the House and Senate. Okay, then, so other differences. So just make sure you study that House Senate chart, right? Study that carefully. It's just got a lot of basic information. But one thing I don't know if I meant how much I did talk about it, I think, in that original PowerPoint lecture thing I put out. But you do need to know some of the more important committees, especially in the House. Because committees are important. Like committees, you need to know that committees are just really important. Like that's where most of the work is done in Congress. They break up their work because there's so many of them. Even in the Senate, there's 100 senators, but it'd be hard to get stuff done with 100 people, right? So most of the work on legislation is done in committees. So you know, like, why committees are important, what they do, like what's the purpose of them. You also need to know the different types of committees, like standing versus select versus conference versus joint committee. Do you guys feel like you need some clarification on that? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, could you go over them?
All right. So So basically, the most important of all the committees are the standing committees. The standing committees are like the Committee on Agriculture, the Committee on Education, the Armed Services Committee, the Agriculture Committee. Or I think I already said that, but they're based on subject matter. So like different committees deal with different topics of legislation. So like if a bill was introduced to like give subsidies to farmers, that would probably be sent to the Agriculture Standing Committee for consideration. And remember, when a bill gets to committee, I don't know if Ms. Gordon mentioned this when she did her legislative process, but like the chairperson of that committee is extremely powerful. And remember, you should also look at that sheet I posted on how committees are set up by party. Remember, every chairperson is from the majority party, and every standing committee has more members from the majority party. So like right now, the Senate is Republican controlled majority and the House is majority Democrats. So that means every chairperson in the House is a Democrat and every chairperson in the Senate right now is Republican. And in this, it's based on seniority, not always, but usually it's the most senior member. It doesn't mean the oldest is the chairperson, but it's the person who's been on that committee the longest. So seniority in Congress means who's been there longer, not who's oldest, okay? And so anyway, the standing committees are the ones who deal with legislation. Most bills die in committee. So if you're a Democrat in the Senate and you introduce like a bill on gun control, maybe that's sent to like the Senate Judiciary Committee, and it's pretty much going to die right there, right? The chairperson of that committee is going to be a Republican. The majority of the members are going to be Republican. That bill just automatically is dead on arrival. Okay, so most bills that are introduced never make it even past that first step, which is after it's introduced, the next step is it goes to standing committee. So, but that's where most of the work is done in committees and then subcommittees. Each committee has even smaller groups called subcommittees. But that's where that's where the members of Congress spend a lot of their time, in committee meetings and discussions behind the scenes, stuff like that. Now, so they can be public. Some of the meetings are private, some of them are public. But anyway, so that's important to understand. But you need to know like specifically things like the Ways and Means Committee. It's kind of a strange sounding name, but that's the House committee that deals with tax laws. So any tax bill that's introduced goes to the Ways and Means Committee. So that's very powerful because they get to write our nation's tax laws. You also have the House Rules Committee. The Senate has a Rules Committee, but it's pretty insignificant. But the House Rules Committee is very powerful. Because remember, they have more rules governing their debate time and stuff. So for any bill to move forward in the House, it has to go through the Rules Committee, and that's why it's called sometimes the traffic cop of the House, right? So, but anyways, make sure you know some of those committees, and then so that's standing committees. You have select committees or temporary committees that usually have a couple of them are permanent, but most of them are temporary. And so you would have a select committee would be to like investigate something. So once they come up with their findings, the committee usually disbands. So a select committee, sometimes called a special committee, that's like the Watergate committee. Their purpose was to investigate Nixon and see if he had broken laws and stuff during Watergate. And once Nixon resigned, the committee really didn't have any purpose anymore, so they disbanded. After this whole virus thing, they might have a select committee to investigate what happened. How did the United States prepare for this, and what could we have done differently? And they might come out with a report on how we can better prepare for this stuff in the future. So those would be select committees, temporary and for a specific purpose usually. You have joint committees, any committee that has House and Senate members. Some are permanent, some are temporary. So you have like the permanent joint committee on taxation that has members of like the tax committee in the House, the Ways and Means Committee, and the tax committee in the Senate, which is called the Finance Committee. So they sometimes meet together on the joint committee on taxation to like plan their tax strategies and stuff. But you also have temporary joint committees, which that's where you get your conference committee. The conference committee specifically forms to work out a compromise on a bill that passed the House and Senate. But if they were slightly different, you might have a conference committee to work out a compromise, to work out one common bill. Because the Constitution requires that the that the House and Senate have to agree on a bill before they send it to the president for his signature or veto. Okay. I gave the example of like the House passes a speed limit, national speed limit of like 60 miles per hour. The Senate passes a national speed limit of 70 miles per hour. They might have a conference committee of House and Senate members, and they may come up with a compromise of like 65 miles per hour. Once that bill is agreed to, then they can finally send it to the president. Okay. But yeah, just the basic stuff you guys should be able to review, like the age difference, the size difference, the like, so minimum age, how long they serve, like House members, 2 years, senators, 6 years. So make sure you just review that stuff. It's pretty easy. Plus, since it's open note, you guys just have your chart. It should be really easy. All right, so what else? So yeah, rules differences. So the House has more rules because they're so much bigger. House committees are also more important in a sense because the House has to break up their work into smaller groups. So both House and Senate committees are very important, but in the House, it's almost everything almost has to be done in committee. So, but yeah, so make sure the rules. So there's more rules in the House. They have limited debate time on bills. Members are also limited, so how long they can speak, and then the total debate time is limited, and the type of amendments you can add are usually limited. Whereas in the Senate, it's kind of like a free-for-all. They can set rules for debate, but the typical rule is that they can speak for as long as they want. So that's where filibusters come in. A filibuster is when a senator doesn't, if one or more senators doesn't like a bill, they can just keep talking. Once the bill comes to the floor, they can just keep talking about it, and they can talk about anything they want. Some of them have read their grandma's recipes for biscuits or something, or they read stories out of a book or a novel or something, and so they're just killing time. They're trying to just give the supporters of the bill, or pressure them to give up and say, okay, we're not going to just talk forever. We're not going to waste our time. So let's just withdraw the bill and go move on to something else. So a filibuster can usually it's just the threat of a filibuster that stops a bill. They don't actually have to usually do the filibuster. Mr. Davo is calling me. I don't know why, but I'll turn that off. So anyway, but yeah, so you have vote to end a filibuster. It's called cloture. So cloture is you need 60 votes in the Senate. A lot of you wrote 67 on your homework. It's 60. It used to be 67, but they changed that rule, several years ago. So, all right, someone playing music here. The lawmaking process, again, just review the legislative process handout that you guys should have filled out. Again, this is going to be a lot easier when you guys have open note. So if it was the regular test situation, it would be a little harder. But yeah, just make sure you know the different steps involved and what can happen at different stages. Anyway, are there any questions about specific legislative process, or you guys have the flow chart, or the notes? I also posted a flow chart on Edmodo also. And the president, of course, the executive branch comes up with a lot of ideas for laws, like when he does his State of the Union address. If you've ever seen that, he lays out a lot of things he wants to accomplish. So the president can try to get Congress to pass a law, but they can do whatever they want. So only a member of Congress can introduce a law. But once the law is passed by the House and Senate, of course, the president can veto it. He can sign it. He can also just wait 10 days and the bill automatically becomes law. But there's also something called a pocket veto. And that's that would be if Congress goes out of session before that 10 days expires or passes, the bill is automatically, what is this? Why the impeached presidents got impeached? No, you don't need to know why they got impeached. So yeah, so the pocket veto would be like, let's say the Congress passes a bill on December 20th and Congress adjourns for the year on December 22nd. The bill passes, it's sent to the president. He doesn't sign it. Only 2 days have passed and Congress goes out of session. that bill is automatically vetoed. That's a pocket veto. So that's only if Congress adjourns before 10 days passes, if they go out of session. Okay, so that doesn't happen very often, but let's see what else. So you guys understand, so the chairman, us again, with the committees, the standing committees, the majority party has more members on each committee, so they get to dominate like what gets passed out of committees. Minority bills rarely get passed from the minority party. Remember, the Senate minority party, though, does have more power than the House minority party. Does anyone know why? Like, what do you remember why that's, or maybe you don't? I think I said that in the PowerPoint, but because what can the Senate minority do that the House minority can't do to block a bill? It's what we just talked about, right? In the Senate, the minority party can utilize the filibuster as long as they have, more than 40 votes to keep it going. Because remember, it takes 60 votes to stop it. So as long, the Democrats have basically 47 members right now, 45 technically, with two independents who caucus with the Democrats. They meet with the Democrats anyway. So they can block a bill. If all the Democrats oppose a bill in the Senate, they can just stop it through a filibuster. So the minority party in the Senate has that tool at their disposal that the minority party in the House doesn't have. In the House, the majority party can basically ram through anything it wants to. And then this wasn't a major thing, but in the PowerPoint, I talked about different models of representation. It's like trustee versus delegate versus politico. Trustee is when you see your job as like, yeah, the people elected me, but I should use my best judgment when looking at bills and do what I think is best, what my conscience tells me. So remember, it's like, trust me to do the job. Delegates are representatives. So a delegate model would be like if a representative just tries to do what his or her constituents want him to do. Remember, constituents are the people you represent in your district or state. And a politico kind of does what's best at the moment, which is most of them probably do. Like sometimes you act like a delegate, sometimes you act like a trustee, sometimes you act like a partisan, which is like you follow your party, things like that. Hopefully you did that redistricting. Did you guys have, assuming you guys hopefully figured it out, but if you guys were able to gerrymander the districts properly. But so yeah, but reapportionment. So reapportionment is, if you guys, again, I'm going through the study guide here, if you guys have it with you. Reapportionment is what happens every 10 years. We're undergoing a census right now. I just filled mine out yesterday, I think. So the census that they're trying to track count our population, right? And so try to make sure your parents are filling that out, because the more people Georgia has, the more benefits we get from the government and the more representation we get and so forth. But so this reapportionment is when they divvy up the House seats. There's 435 House seats, right? The Senate isn't affected by that because every state gets 2 senators. But House membership is based on how many people you have roughly, right? So although every state gets 1 no matter what, but the reapportionment is when they divvy up those House seats every 10 years and sort of redistribute them. Some states gain House members, some states lose, some states stay the same. Redistricting is what happens next. That's when the state legislatures draw the districts for the state. They draw, who's going to be in which congressional district. So they kind of tell us which district we're going to be in. And that's where the gerrymandering comes in, right? Because in the state legislature of Georgia, the Republicans have a majority. So they're going to draw the districts in a way that helps their party win as many seats as possible, just like you did in that game, right? In Democratic states, the state legislature gets to do the drawing. So whoever has the majority, right? So that's a big advantage if your party's the majority. Now, I mean, obviously I think gerrymandering is bad. I think it shouldn't happen, but it pretty much does in almost every state. But you need to understand the downside of gerrymandering, right? And what it leads to is like heavily Democratic districts and heavily Republican districts. So like in Alabama, Alabama has, I think, 7 House districts. 6 of them elect Republicans and 1 of them elects a Democrat, because they drew the state legislature in Alabama drew one Democratic district that they knew would elect a Democrat. They concede that one seat to the Democrats, but that gives them a majority of Republicans in all the other districts by cramming or packing the Democrats all into that one, mostly into that one district, right? So it's bad for the voters, because in a Democratic state, the same thing happens to Republican voters. You don't really have a real choice in the election, but also it leads to more extreme members, because you have these really liberal districts and really conservative districts that elect these really like far right and far left representatives. And that means when they get to Congress, they're on the extremes. There's no moderates hardly who can work out compromises or, sort of work in the middle. So I think it's really bad. Typical member of Congress, I think you guys that's pretty easy to grasp. If you listen to the PowerPoint, it was, they're mostly old white guys, right? Old white males. Most of them are wealthy. Most of them are well educated. The average age is like, of all of Congress, is like 57 or 58, so they're tend to be old white. They're also mostly Christian, so it's not a real diverse group, especially in the Senate. The House is a little more diverse in terms of race and stuff, but the Senate is like 76 white guys, like 22 white women, I think, or I may be missing some, and then like there's like a couple African Americans, and that's, I don't know, I guess there's a couple Hispanic, but I mean, it's just the Senate is mostly really old white guys. Anyway, and then the party leadership. So I used to have you in the past, you would have had to know like the names of all the leaders, but I figure that's going to be really easy if you have open notes. So I do want you to know the names of the Georgia senators and the Georgia House representative, Lucy McBath for our district, but I'm probably not going to ask you specific names of leaders, but you need to know the different leadership positions and what they do, right? So you have the Speaker of the House, it's like most powerful member of the House. That's currently Nancy Pelosi, but again, I don't think I'm going to ask you about the specific people. But they're really powerful because technically they're the presiding officer of the House, meaning they would run House debates, but in reality, they have many more powers. Like the House Speaker gets to send bills to committee and decide basically when bills or if bills are going to be brought to the floor along with the Rules Committee, because she appoints like the Democrats on the Rules Committee, and so she can hand pick her top supporters and to be on the Rules Committee, things like that. Anyway, it's a very powerful position, most powerful person in the House by far. But the equivalent in the Senate is the president of the Senate, right? But remember, that position is not very powerful. The president of the Senate is, by the Constitution, is always the vice president of the United States. So Mike Pence is the president of the Senate, but the president of the Senate is the presiding officer, but rarely does the president ever preside over the Senate. And so Mike Pence rarely ever goes there. So you have something called the president. And remember, the president can only vote to break a tie. So otherwise, they have no voting power. They can't speak or give their opinion on bills and things like that. So, but the president pro tempore was a position they created to fill in for the president when he couldn't be there. So that goes to usually the most senior member of the majority party. So right now, it's a guy named Chuck Grassley, and he's the president pro tempore. He's supposed to preside over Senate meetings when the president is absent. But the reality is anyone who's in the majority party can preside at any given time. But you do need to know those positions. The majority and minority leaders are like the party leaders from each chamber. So you have a House majority and House minority leader. The House majority leader would be a Democrat right now. The minority leader would be Republican, right? The Senate, same thing. But remember, the Senate majority leader and the Senate minority leader are the two most powerful leaders in the Senate, okay? Not the president of the Senate. And then you need to know just the whips in general. The whip's job, think about whipping people into shape or cracking the whip on people. Their job is to enforce party discipline, make sure the members of the party are sticking with the party leadership. They can't force them to, but their job is to pressure members of the party to stay loyal to the party position and vote the way the leaders want them to. So they work hard to like listen to the members, the regular rank and file members, and get them to go along with what the party wants to accomplish. Okay, they count votes and stuff. They'll check in with members and report back to the top leaders, the speaker, the majority leader, minority leaders, whatever, and say, here's how many votes we have on this bill and things like that. So they do a lot of, they're supposed to be like the liaison between the top leaders and the rank and file members. And there's a whole team of whips, but usually we just talk about the majority whip and the minority whip. And then you guys know what an incumbent, if you're the incumbent, that means you're the person already in office and you're seeking re-election. So you need to know that like being an incumbent is a big advantage for many reasons. Some of it's like name recognition. They tend to be able to raise more money for their elections. You know, they have ties to their constituents already. So they're able to, you know, they can tout their accomplishments as a member of Congress. So there's a lot of advantages to being the incumbent. Remember, incumbents, that's like the number one factor of whether or not you're going to be reelected is if you're the incumbent. I mean, if you're going to win the election. So, but a lot of House districts are safe anyway because of gerrymandering, right? So incumbents get reelected over and over and over, you know, so we saw the House and Senate. In the Senate, the reelection rate for incumbents is like 80+%. And in the House, it's usually like 90+% success rate. Okay. Pork barrel. So pork barrel legislation on the study guide. So that's a name for like legislation that is seen as sort of wasteful or unnecessary. It's basically the technical name is if you earmark money. Earmarking money is like designating it for a specific purpose. Like if a bill said that, you know, we're going to have $2 million that's earmarked to Georgia for, you know, rebuilding this bridge on I-85 or something. That's earmarking the money. It's that money is designated rather than just like this is money for highways for Georgia. This is earmarking it for a specific purpose, or this money is to, you know, build a new addition to this military base or whatever, or expansion, or build this research facility for science, for some, you know, scientific research or something. So that is sometimes, you know, pork can be useful, but it's seen as sort of unnecessary. Like, so like spending money on studying the mating habits of polar bears. Well, that may seem wasteful to a lot of people, but you know, maybe it's important because polar bears becoming extinct or something. So pork barrel legislation is money that people often complain about that Congress spends, and sometimes it is kind of ridiculous. So anyway, well that and then I already went over the representatives. So that was a quick run through of the study guide. I'm trying to think, is there anything else that, so again, you guys should look at all the stuff I've posted, especially the answers to the outline. Look over the stuff I posted because that gives you some pretty good detail about things. You know, if you can go back and watch some of the PowerPoint, the lecture. But yeah, since it's open note, I'm expecting the grades to be pretty good. But just make sure you don't use, you know, just don't use your phones. That's even making it too easy, even more easy. So anyway, just follow those rules. Are there any questions or other things you want to go over? You guys mostly have your mics off, I think. So anyone have anything else you want to go over, or any questions about anything else? Hopefully you guys are hanging in there okay. I know this kind of stinks. Like, well, maybe you guys like it, but I think it's hard. It's hard to do this. I think this proves some of the limits of online education. But anyway, yeah, that's what I was wondering too. Who is Maison? Maison. Anyway, so guys, if there's no other questions, so I'll post this. I'm going to try to post this on honors government YouTube channel that I created. So I'll put the link out. So if you guys know friends who weren't able to make it, they can go watch this, or you guys can rewatch it. But if there's no other questions, so I don't hear anything, I don't see anything, then I guess we can call it a day for now. All right. So good luck, and let me know if you have any other questions.
God.
Hit me up on either the email or on Edmodo. All right. So good luck. And so tomorrow the test will be posted. You guys will take it on Edmodo. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Good deal. All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. See ya.
See ya.